Good evening, Ms. Orth.
Good evening.
Orth.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you were there? I don't know. It's no day in paradise around here. Oh, there's a $10 cover charge for you.
Okay, okay.
So. Yeah. That's hard.
Hello. Evening.
Hello, everyone.
Can
Hello.
everybody hear me? I'm going to do a sound check, please. Mr. Haines, you can hear me?
Yes,
Thank you. Mr. Phytros, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gomes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
This is the Open Public Meetings Act statement. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Ridgefield Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the Bergen Record Municipal Building, Board of Education offices and district website. Public participation instructions. Public participation will be conducted both in person and virtually through Zoom. All public will be muted throughout the meeting. Public participation comments are limited to 5 minutes. The public will be able to both speak and be seen by the board when participating virtually or telephonically via Zoom. Individuals participating virtually that wish to make comments during public participation will need to raise hand by clicking the blue hand icon at the bottom of their Zoom window. Individuals participating by telephone that wish to make comments during public participation will need to hit *9 on their telephone to raise their hand. The Business Administrative Board Secretary will then unmute individuals one at a time to speak in the order that their hand was raised. Okay, I'm going to take the roll call. Mr. Phytros? Is he here? Is he on the? Oh, he's there, but he's.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Gibbons?
Yes.
Mr. Gomes?
Yes,
Mrs. McNeil? Here. Dr. Martinez?
Here.
Mrs. Orth?
Here.
Mrs. Rodriguez? Here. Mr. Verselli?
Here.
Mr. Cathcart?
Here.
And President Fernandez?
Here.
Also present is our acting superintendent, Dr. Barry Haines, and school business administrator, Carrie Grabstein.
Take a motion to open up the retreat.
I make that motion.
second,
Good evening, everyone.
So, good evening, everyone. I'd like to read a statement that adds some context to our discussion this evening. And I'd like to start with a historical perspective of our education system, which had its roots in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Back then, the founders of our public system, during a time when the majority of citizenry was not educated, thought an educated citizenry is a vital requisite for the survival as us, as free people. Towards these ends and throughout the 1800s, schools were built to provide free public education. And in our own Ridgefield Park, as the village was formed in 1892, and as our own Board of Education was formed in the early 1900s, the village started providing free public education for our citizens. Throughout our education history, local school boards in the United States have been entitled, and I'd suggest delighted, with their own local school board and their own local control. It is the major reason that New Jersey has so many school districts, because each is endowed with their own power to exert local control over issues such as curriculum, what students learn, and how they learn it. Local district goals and issues such as how we're meeting the needs of our post-pandemic students, how we're prioritizing social justice and social and emotional learning, and how we're engaging to build early childhood education programs for our 3- and 4-year-olds, most of whom at this time do not yet have access to a free and public education. These are local issues that we are charged with, that we get to set a vision for, and that we are charged with moving our village forward. These local issues change constantly as our children change, and as the needs of our children change within the context of our society. We are always redefining what it means to be an educated citizenry, and I offer these examples. When I was a student in K-12, which is quite a few years ago, the most controversial activity in schools at the time was finding out that someone else in school had snuck in a Playboy magazine into their locker. Fast forward when I was a middle school teacher, and as the entire knowledge of humankind was made digital, placed online, and expanded exponentially, I had fervent arguments with my 8th graders that no, it wasn't appropriate to read the Monica Lewinsky court proceedings in my class. Yes, even if it was a government document posted online, I would suggest that the content of those proceedings were pornographic in nature and not age appropriate for you to be viewing. Fast forward to today, when every student starting in 3rd or 4th grade carries around a pocket device that accesses all of the world's libraries, including pornographic ones, representing both all that is good and all that is evil in our world. These are the current issues that the New Jersey Department of Education grappled with and that we as a local Board of Education recognize and must act upon as we chart a path for educating our current students. Today, it's incumbent upon us to recognize that the students in front of us today are different from students of 20 or 30 years ago. They have access to unfathomable amounts of information at their fingertips, and they exhibit an inquisitiveness to follow Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok links through the best and worst media that the internet has to offer. Which brings us to the meeting today. Faced with a set of comprehensive health standards revised by the state to be delivered to our students with the recognition that they are different, that they live in a different world, and they have different needs that require local educational resources that are responsive to their needs. And before continuing, as we engage in discussions about the content standards as they do get graphic, I'd suggest that any speaker tonight, including myself, demonstrates a sensitivity to the public that may be listening simply by stating, what I'm about to say may not be appropriate for all age groups. Our conversation this evening, then, I hope will also include the opportunity to continue the positive discussions that we initiated at our meeting last month on July 14th, including Board Policy 5756, of which there are copies of in the back for transgender students. If you've delved into the standards, and there's also a handout in the back by Mr. Ramundi, and I'd suggest to anybody in the audience, please pick up a handout, and I'll show where they are available online in a few minutes. I'd suggest that the Department of Education had the best interest of educating our students in the state, of teaching them to be both knowledgeable and aware so that they could stay safe, stay out of harm's way, self-advocate, understand risky behavior, and understand both consent and consequences, ideals that I think we as a learning community agree upon. As we enter into the presentation and our discussion this evening, I would suggest that curriculum is not a static document. It doesn't dictate what and how all students learn. Curriculum is a living, breathing, fluent artifact that serves as a reference. It's an ideal. It's what we want our children to learn so that we can best support them in who they are and who they are to become. So the health curriculum tonight is up for discussion so that we as a village can chart a path forward according to the discretion of our community. And I'd elaborate here. The interim commissioner of education is very clear. Yes, the standards are state mandated and state required, but they are up to the discretion of local control as to how we implement them. It's what we feel is best for our families and our children. It is a live document that meets the community needs for an educated citizenry in the village. What I'm about to present then had a great amount of input from our faculty, including health teachers, our athletic director, administrators, and especially our principals. We're going to start with some agreements based on the discussions that we had on July 14th, what the board heard from the community, and what we've had discussions on since. And those agreements start with, you may opt your student out of any lesson in the curriculum using the school opt-out form. I'll show you where those forms are available by the end of this presentation. They're available for every grade K through 12 and every school. Like many other subject areas, your health teacher, your local building health teacher will be sending families a preview, whether that's a trimester or approximately every 4 to 8 weeks of the upcoming units of study, much like you get in social studies or English language arts, which you should be getting. It's a preview of what students will be learning about. You will have an opportunity to meet with your building health teachers during back to school night to express your concerns and curriculum lesson preferences, and I'd encourage all of you to engage in those conversations. resources, including videos, lesson plans, presentations, graphics that health teachers and professionals might consider sensitive according to this handout. And that's the handout that we're about to get into, will be shared with families prior to a lesson being taught. And finally, students and families who opt out of lessons, as was discussed last time, will be given both Google Classroom activities similar to substitute activities such as brain pop videos or less sensitive health topics. Those are some of the agreements which I'd like to set as the framework as we engage in other discussions tonight. So could I ask all of you in the audience to take this out? This is my education side, if you guys don't mind. If you don't have this handout, please visit Mr. Ramundi. I'll give you a couple seconds. While you're doing that, let me show the audience at home where you can find this handout. So if you go to the district website, and I'll navigate there myself. It's under superintendent presentations. So if you go to our district and you go over to acting superintendent and you go to the very bottom of that, you'll find superintendent reports and resources. You'll find tonight's presentation is at the top of this list. And when you click on that, you should have access to all of the links and everything else that I'm about to present tonight, including the handout that the audience in person has in front of them. Okay. So let's start with, I believe, some agreements as we go into this. When Tasby Weisgerber was here last time to present, she shared with us some of the most controversial topics. And as I stated at the beginning, what I'm about to engage in may not be age appropriate for all grades. On page 2, if you open up the handout, that's to the second page, you'll see aqua highlighted standards. And the aqua highlighted standards was deemed by Tasmin, by our administrators, by our principals, by the athletic director, by other professionals in our district to be the most frequently new standards that families would mostly opt out of. Can I ask those of you in person, actually, if you're at home too, what I love about this handout is it shows there isn't a lot new in these standards. You can see on the left side in this handout are the 2014 relationships and standards. And on the left side in this chart, it shows what's new. On the right side, it shows some of these have been revised a little bit, such as at the top of page 2, you can see 2.4.2. By the way, if it ends in a 2, it means second grade. So by the end of grade 2, and because they're grade bands, that means it could be taught in kindergarten through grade 2. By the end of grade 2, the top one was compare and contrast different kinds of families locally and globally. And the new standard is describe different kinds of families locally, nationally, and globally, and note similarities in the ways in which they keep their children safe. So not a lot of change between many of the standards. There are new standards then listed about halfway down page 2. And the one I highlighted in aqua is the same one on the screen, which most people were talking about last time. And that is list medically accurate names for body parts, including genitals. Rather than get into the discussion of how that's taught, because the curriculum is posted online, I think what parents are looking for is, may I opt my child out of that lesson? And as I said, at the end of this presentation, you'll see a link where you can click and opt your child out, and they will be given alternate activities. That's true for these 4 main topics, which were of most concern. And I'd ask you to join me again, flipping through the handout. The next is in grade band 5. So 2.1.5 on page 3. Explain common human sexual development and the role of hormones. That may include, and teachers may or may not choose to use these terms and resources, romantic and sexual feelings, masturbation, mood swings, timing of puberty onset. That's on page 3, highlighted in aqua. Again, one of the most frequently cited standards that people will opt out on. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to page 5. So this is grade band 5, which means between grades 6 and 8, define vaginal, oral, and anal sex. That's halfway down page 5 as another frequent opt-out standard. And the last one is on page 7. If you join me turning to page 7, about 3/4 of the way down in aqua, describing the human sexual response cycle. And that's included here. It may not look like a standard people would opt out on, but as I come to the questions and answers that were posted online by the public, I'll go ahead and explain why that turned into a standard that parents may feel more comfortable opting out on. Those were the most frequently cited standards. And those are the ones that I think parents would feel most comfortable opting out on. Now there's a level 2, and we're going to go back through the handout for grade bands and yellow highlights. These are less sensitive than level 1, but they are still sensitive. I put a note at the top of this screen too, because, and this can come up in our discussion in a few minutes, we have a board policy 5756, which talks about ensuring that our children are educated in gender identity and sexual orientation. The policy is backed by Mr. Raimondi also. If you'd like to pick one of those up, go ahead. Because we have a board policy that determines that is one of our goals, to educate our citizenry here in the village, I did not choose any of those standards, and my administrators did not choose any of those standards. Actually, we got to some good discussions about it because it's in a board policy. So the standards that we did choose, grade band 3 through 5, explain the ways pregnancy can occur, IVV and surrogacy, explain the relationship between sexual intercourse and human reproduction. That's level 2. I'm moving on to page 5, which is grade band 6 through 8. And again, these happen between grades 6 and 8. Describe the human reproductive systems, the external and internal body parts and their functions, and the natural variations that exist in human bodies. Page 5, identify factors that are important in deciding whether and when to engage in sexual behaviors. Identify short and long-term contraception and safer sex methods that are effective, and describe how to access and use them. And page 6, describe pregnancy testing, the signs of pregnancy, and pregnancy options, including parenting, abortion, and adoption. Again, some of those terms would be controversial to some of our families, and we support those families in teaching those things at home and opting their child out. The next grade band is page 8. And again, these are terms then that are taught in grades 9 through 12 on page 8. Analyze personal and societal factors that can influence decisions about pregnancy options, including parenting, abortion, safe haven, and adoption. And likewise, identify medically accurate sources of information and local services that provide contraceptive methods, including emergency contraception and condoms, and pregnancy options, including parenting, abortion, safe haven, adoption, and prenatal care. So those are levels 1 and 2 sensitive that we, again, as the staff discussed, felt would be, I'm sorry, did I miss one? Yeah, I'm sorry. I broke this into 2. Yeah, I think that's it. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah, it's a duplicate. My apologies. Okay, that we felt were the most frequently cited standards that parents would feel comfortable opting out on. On August 5th, I just wanted to review that I did send out a memo to everybody in the district, all families in the district, telling about this meeting and telling about some of the things that were going to happen in this meeting, a link to the curriculum and a link to the opt-out. The link to the curriculum levels are here if you wanted to look at more resources and some of the resources that are being taught. However, yes, you can look at all the resources, but as I suggested at the beginning, it's a living, breathing document. And those resources are really best discussed with the teacher who's teaching them. So, and I'd encourage you to engage in those discussions. And you can engage in those discussions by doing this. So let's say, for example, I'm a Lincoln school parent, and I want to go ahead and opt my child out of a discussion in grades 3 through 5. And what's going to pop up then are the most frequently cited standards that we just looked at. They coincide to this. The beginning of the form talks about, in the state of New Jersey, you have the right as a parent or guardian to opt your child out of any of these beliefs that you feel is in conflict with your own belief so that you can educate your child as you see fit. So the form is exactly like this. They are open tonight. If you'd like to log in and start completing them, you're welcome to do that. Parent or guardian name, your phone number, your child's last name, your child's first name, the grade level they're in, because this is Lincoln School specific, and it's going to go to the Lincoln counselor and the Lincoln health teachers. It knows that already, and that there's the most frequently opted out standard in this grade band. This is grades 3 through 5. The second levels that we just looked at, the highlighted yellows are also there. And then there's an open-ended one. If there's another standard that you believe that you would like to opt out your child, you can complete this. And again, that gets sent directly to the teachers who were instructing these standards. We felt as a team that, and in talking to parents too, parents who came and visited me and had some really fruitful discussions, I want to have a discussion about this specific topic, like what resources are using, how will it be taught? Please write that below, because I may want to keep my kid in the class, but I need more information from you, and I need you to tell me the specific resources that you're using so that I can make a decision, an educational decision on if I want my child to stay in this class, if I want to take them out and teach this topic at home, please let me know. And by check marking below, you understand that your child will be provided an alternate assignment for standards for opting out. So generally, all the forms are coded the same. That is, the blue tags and the yellow tags will appear in each one of these. So for grade band 6, you will see the different options that are highlighted in your handout, for example, if I scroll down here. And again, it goes to those teachers teaching these specific examples and gives you an opportunity to engage in a discussion with them. Okay. So there we go. Lastly, there were some questions that came in to be answered since July 14th. And I answered them, and I was amused that over the past week, many more came in. So I tried to capture all that came in. I think there were 14 or 15 questions. Many of them, I think, were just answered, but I'm going to go through them anyway because I think the people in front of us deserve them. I know some of the people sitting here in person asked these questions, and I'll go ahead and answer them. What will be done if most parents have a problem with the curriculum during the review period at the beginning of August? Will there be enough time for it to be revised? Well, the curriculum is there, except for 2 grades. It's available for parents to comment on. That was starting today when I answered it. However, all curriculum standards are available hyperlinked here by topic. So again, our curriculum aligns to the state standards. If you have a revision question or want to know resources, filling out one of those opt-out forms and getting it directly to the principals, the nurse, the health teachers, probably the best way to go. Excuse me. Since Ms. has mentioned that self-esteem is the biggest reason why children engage in sexual activities at a young age, our focus should be on working on their self-esteem and not on teaching them about sexuality. This is a continuing focus on district goal number 1, where all students are known, included, cared for, and evolving in their self-awareness. This is a huge priority in our district right now, to build K through 12 systems of support, instruction, and student opportunities that ensure that children are known, included, and cared for, that they are guided in their development and their self-awareness, identity, and sense of agency. Teaching our students about their sexuality is part of the mandated state standards that follow that goal. What, if any, curriculum guide sample lessons such as the 3 R's, respect and responsibility, will our district implement to meet the 2020 standards? So the 3R is cited as a resource. And again, curriculum guides may be found here. We are not using the 3 R's in K through 4, but our goal is to use the Great Body Shop, which actually came in today, and our teachers will have access to the Great Body Shop starting today, so they can use those standards. In grades 5 through 8, we will not be using the 3 R's for specific topic resources, but instead using them for generalities. Again, please consult with your local health teacher about more specifics. Will students be required and encouraged to access any websites promoted by advocates for youth? The resources, materials, and websites for curriculum are included in the curriculum guides, which are posted. It might be something that teachers refer to, but content would be specifically previewed by the teacher to meet the grade level and the topic. Why in 9 through 12, sex ed is abortion taking up 4 class periods with 6 bullet points, activities while teen pregnancy is 3 class periods and 3 bullet points. As you review the curriculum, as I reviewed the curriculum, the term abortion appears in grade 9 once, embedded in the following required state standard, and in grade 11 once or twice, embedded in the following required state standard. Beyond that, there is no mention of class periods or bullet points activities. Please let us know what page in the curriculum you're referring to, because we couldn't find that reference to any of the other activities. This is because that came up as a question. That's why this became a level 2 or a yellow highlight for certain parents to opt out of if they chose to. Are there any grants? My apologies. Are there any grants linked to the school district implementing the state new sex ed standards? How much of the grants or the money is being received? How would it be allocated? Are school districts penalized economically or in any other way if they choose not to implement the new sex ed standards? To our knowledge, there's no grant money linked to implementing these state standards. The New Jersey Department of Education always has the option of either taking away CUSAC points or not fully allocating our ESEA or title funding. My husband and I don't believe in a certain topic that will be in the health curriculum. Would it be possible to opt my child out of that curriculum? Yes, we just presented the opt-out process. Ms. Tasmin Weisgerber, who has been hired to assist our teachers in their new sex ed curriculum writing, is in a master's program at Rutgers studying to become an activist for social transformation. What does social transformation look like and how is it achieved? I don't know those answers. I think those questions might be best answered by Ms. Tasmin Weisgerber. What is the name of the specific study Ms. Weisgerber stated in her presentation that proves that some sex offenders choose to avoid youth who know proper terminology? Still have that question out to Ms. Weisgerber. Another question for the board. Can you explain to the community what educational psychological will implementing the new sex ed will provide to children? Please cite with facts these benefits. Working with 3 or 4 other people, we tried to decipher this and come up with this answer as I think this is what that question meant. If we understand the question correctly, in grades K through 2, the ability to prevent and or identify abuse and accurately communicate the need for help from a trusted adult is a help psychologically to our students. In grades 3 through 5, in addition to K through 12, being able to advocate for yourself and to have the confidence to say no in certain social situations. In grades 6 through 8, in addition to K through 5, being able to identify psychological consequences of sexual activity, including the New Jersey Department of Education position of abstinence. In grades 9 through 12, in addition to all the others, the ability to understand giving a consent agreement or not consenting. Will the boys and girls be separated for certain topics? And this goes back to when I was a 3rd through 5th grade student, and I think how all of us were trained in this. In 5th grade, we do intend to talk to students separated for puberty lessons. How in-depth is the lesson on oral, vaginal, anal sex, and masturbation? Is a whole marking period or just one lesson? Masturbation is not a lesson and is not taught or defined. The way it will be discussed, or the ways it's intended to be discussed by the health teacher, is that there are misconceptions about touching oneself, meaning touching oneself will not result in blindness or self-harm. Oral, vaginal, anal sex will be covered by topic only, and in the context of consequences of each of these, such as, even in the era in which we live, how monkeypox is transmitted, that there are certain types of sex that will result in STDs, and that vaginal sex can result in pregnancy. We intend that these will be covered in one lesson because, again, those were, that topic in grade 8 was one of the frequently highlighted blue topics or standards that our families might opt out on. So yes, that would be covered in one lesson so families can feel comfortable opting out on it. And then the student would attend the next day. And again, you'd have As was stated at the beginning, there would be about 6 weeks heads up. You'd see the pacing guide, which is in the curriculum, which looks out 6 weeks in advance. The teacher goes ahead and sends that out, and then we'll follow up with what's coming up on a more daily basis so that you can go ahead and use the opt-out form. Again, it's less about what it is and more about consequences as a result of this activity, such as pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases, such as the current monkeypox. I see the content for 4th grade is still in progress. Is there a way to get an overview of the topics? We are still working on a couple of these grades. The frameworks are there. As we just shared with you, the frameworks and the most frequently used ones to opt out of. And again, the teachers, as they get this curriculum, will be sharing that by trimester or 6 to 8 weeks out. How in-depth is all of this? Is this only surface level conversations? Who is teaching this? This is taught by our health and phys ed teachers. I think I've given a couple of good examples so far of the type of conversations that are expected in class. I'm sorry. Grade 8 health curriculum guide says students will define vaginal, anal, and oral sex and the phases of human sexual response, which by definition is the sexual response cycle has 4 phases: excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. While sexual response cycle is included in the state curriculum, the 4 phases that are referred to do not appear in either the state curriculum or the curriculum or lesson plans. As again, I was sitting with other faculty members and we looked at this and we couldn't find those 4 phases mentioned anywhere. Both men and women experience these phases, although the timing usually is different. For example, it is unlikely that both partners will reach orgasm at the same time. What standard requires teaching this, and what is the perceived benefit of teaching this to students? The term orgasm does not appear in either the state curriculum nor in our curriculum guides. 8th grade will identify the forms of sexual expression, abstinence, dreams, fantasies, self-touch, and masturbation. That is true. Page 11 of the 8th grade curriculum talks about those terms and definitions. These topics are at the discretion of the district, and we are proposing that we use the terms dreams and nocturnal emissions. Which state standards require this to be taught? Why are we teaching about masturbation and fantasies when it is not required by the state? This sounds awfully sick. The state standard by the end of 5th grade reads, explain common human sexual development and the role of hormones, romantic and sexual feelings, masturbation, mood swings, timing of puberty onset. Again, this is at the discretion of the teacher who will, if they choose to use these terms, will teach them in one lesson and provide enough lead time for you to opt out of this lesson or these lessons. In 12th grade, hormones and pleasure. Within this context, this goes into risks and consequences, including consent discussions. By 12th grade, students should be able to analyze the influence, of peers, family, media, social norms, and culture on the expression of gender, sexual orientation, and identity. Students should also learn to advocate for school and community policies and programs that promote dignity and respect for people of all genders, gender expressions, gender identities, and sexual orientations. Is it correct to say that part of the sex ed curriculum is to teach kids to become advocates to change community policies and programs? What are some examples? Advocating to change community policies is politics, is it not? Why is advocating for policy change part of sexual education? I think the best answer to this goes back to how I opened up this meeting, that the goal of public education is to create a educated citizenry, so that they can self-advocate, so that they have knowledge, so that they can form their own opinions, so that they can create future life path for themselves. So the answer is our goal across all curriculum is to support our students in self-advocacy, and as was the history of our free public education in the United States, create an educated citizenry. What does standard 2.1, this is a repeat, and that was about the sexual response cycle. Again, neither the curriculum nor the state standards gets into the sexual response cycle. So those were the questions that appeared online. There we go. There's a reminder link here for questions that may come up again about the LGBTQ policy, which is in the back with Mr. Ramundi. And at this point, going to stop the slideshow and tell President Fernandez, I think it's appropriate for public comment. I will say, I will, to the best of my ability, try to answer questions. I appreciate answering questions as we went through that document in a room with my peers so that we can best answer those and so that we can best ensure our health teachers are in the loop, are being provided professional development, and are sensitive to the topics that our community has about what our community, and that's what we're about to hear, thinks should and should not be taught. Mr. Mike Ramundi, who's the athletic director for grades 7 through 12, and he's also the supervisor of health teachers in grades 7 through 12, I think would voice similarly. We will try to answer questions to the best of our ability, but we would also rather collaborate with our peers to talk about a living, breathing curriculum that best meets the needs of our students moving forward. That's what this meeting is about. President Fernandez.
Yes, at this time, I'd like to open up the floor for public comment while I grab the list.
Luanny Reber.
Good evening, Miss. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing pretty well. So actually, before I start, Dr. Haines.
Can I just ask you to, I'm sorry, to say your
sorry.
address?
133 Hudson Avenue, Ridgefield Park. So before I start, Dr. Haines, I wanted to address you in something you mentioned. You mentioned there has been controversy in schools when it comes to sexual education, and it has been also a little bit of a problem. But actually, there is a big difference. Back then, as you said, the students were the ones asking to see riskier movies, riskier topics, inappropriate behavior. Today, the difference is it is the state of education, the state of New Jersey, the one bringing these inappropriate topics, the one bringing this riskier information. Question for the board and for the parents. I want you guys to think about this. Why are we so interested or pushing to start a curriculum that is going to make so many parents pull out their kids? What benefit is there on that? Think about all that. So we are here for a reason tonight. The new sex standards are causing uproar across our nation and our state. Many school districts have shown discernment and have decided to either reject them completely or leave the discussions of most of these topics for home, where children and guardians can more comfortably discuss it. I am still trying to see any benefits from the implementation of this new sex education. I don't see any benefit, and I'll explain why. One, children are already behind an average of 5 years in education. This sex ed topic will distract, confuse, and even maybe traumatize some of them, adding more years to their diminished education. Second, the American College of Pediatricians has stated their position that exposing young children that have malleable minds to gender identity is psychologically mistreatment of children. They have stated that gender identity is malleable, especially in young children. What does this mean? It means that children that might have not thought of expressing themselves as a different sex will be influenced by this ideology and experiment in this. Also, pediatricians have warned the educational system that puberty blocker medications, which they promote in the new sex ed curriculum, have not been proven safe and is still not FDA approved. The new sex curriculum is being introduced to school with the justification that school supports and affirms teens or children with gender issues. If they affirm it, this will prevent these children from suicide. This is actually false. The Academy of Pediatrics has observed that implementing affirmation of transgenderism for children or teens does not prevent suicide with children in this issue. The state and our board of Ridgefield Park is justifying the implementation of this curriculum by saying that children that know the medical terms and their very detailed private parts have a lower chance of not being molested. I have not seen any medical studies proving this. Actually, many cases of preteens and teen sexual abuse, like the well-known case of the Penn State University football coach that abused boys ages 10 to high school age. And these boys have obvious knowledge of their private parts and details of their sexual body. They still were not protected from their abuse. So knowing the private parts and a specific detail, extreme detail of private parts will not protect children from sexual abuse. Many other towns have changed the new curriculum, leaving most of these topics as home discussion where family values and ideas may be added. Again, there's a big difference. Back then, the students were the one introducing riskier behavior. Today is the state of education and our board introducing this information. I truly hope our board has the discernment, as many other towns have, to do something similar, to list most of these topics at home and to avoid, especially gender identity, which is very damaging to children by the Pediatric Association. They said it. I still cannot find any benefits for implementing this. We should not implement something like this just for the sake of getting points or satisfying state requirements. There's no reason for that. Our children's minds and lives are more important than satisfying state regulations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Reverend John Maxim.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. How are you? My name is John Maxim. I'm the pastor of OCM Grace Church on Bergen and Mount Vernon. And this is my first meeting, so it's at 90 Mount Vernon, if you need an address. I'm very grateful for the chance to meet before you tonight for a short time. Grateful for your service to this community and for the work that you're doing for the children. We share that in common. I think we're all looking to serve the children best and to protect them. And I've seen that throughout the documents that I've gone through. I have to just make one comment, and it's not meant as a judgment, but it is very hard to find the material that you put out there for us to read on the website. It was hard for me, and I do have an education, but it was hard for me to find it. And I finally was sent the information by someone who was kind enough to send it to me. And so maybe you can make that a little bit more presentable to the people that you want, and maybe there will be a better showing as a result of that. But anyway, I went through as much as I could in a couple of days. And I have just 2 points that I want to make in regards to these things. First of all, I come from a family of educators. My father was an art teacher in Montclair High School for 40 years. I have the utmost respect for educators. I have the utmost respect for teachers and for board members. My daughter is a K through 8th grade music teacher, and she has taught me a lot of what is going on that she's facing with children. And so I am up to date, and I hope I'm up to date with some of the things and the changes that are going on in the world around us. And I try to keep up to date. At the last meeting was the first meeting that I attended. And the reason I attended was because someone urged me to come and to be informed of the things that are happening in the curriculum and also to support. And so I came to the last retreat last month. And I think it was only about 2.5 weeks ago. And I was really impressed by a couple of things. First of all, the superintendent mentioned that he welcomed the community input and that we have a community that likes to be involved with things. And I thought that was a very helpful comment. I also appreciated the fact that the person who came to lead a seminar was urging all of us, including, well, mainly the board, but I think all of us to be deep thinkers. And the one thing that I have to say to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, is that I feel that this whole process is rushed. And I'm sure that you feel that way too in general. There's very little time left for us to implement things as educators and in the work that I'm involved with too. But I think it's important that there is an understanding that those kind of pressures can also be met with a request for more time to consider more carefully, and indeed for you to implement what you were taught during that retreat, which is to be informed and to be deep thinkers. And so if you're going to be a deep thinker about things of this nature, and I think that it really does take a lot of time, I would hope that there would be more time than just 2.5 weeks for the board to be presented with a curriculum. The curriculum that we're looking at tonight that was presented is coming from the state, and it has certain outlines, certain requirements that are, on a high level, but actually the curriculum that was made available and that I saw yesterday broken out is much more detailed. And it includes a lot more controversial things than are presented in this one that we received tonight. And I just want to make mention of that. The things that have been translated from these requirements from the state are much more detailed, and they come into the areas that people are concerned about. And so I would really urge you to take time and help the entire process to use deep thinking and to push back and to require more time for you to look into these things. I also remember one thing that the superintendent mentioned at the last meeting, and that was that there needs to be an implementation of an additional bathroom in the schools, right? I believe that's what you said. And so that is also not here. That would be for a neuter kind of I don't know what the correct word was that was referred to there, but it's an additional bathroom implementation in the schools here. And so it goes far beyond what the parents are really being met with here. There's another thing and it's really the last thing I just want to share with you, is that in the brief time that I had to look over some of the resources, and there are many resources, as you know, that are associated with each one of the curriculum items, right? And I also would say that there are quite a few new curriculum items here. In fact, on the first page here for by the end of second grade, 8 out of 11 are new. But so if you're going to be taking a look at new things and the implementation of those things, you also have to be aware of the resources. And I'm not sure if all of the board members in 2.5 weeks have had enough time to fully digest and read through all of those resources that are going to be used by the teachers. And not to mention that the teachers are, I know that it was mentioned that the body works is coming in, but when is school beginning, right? How much time? I would push back on those kind of things and say, we need more time for this implementation to be able to address these things. Now, I do have a different view on some of the things that are being taught. And one of the main things that I want to stress is that I do agree with some of the parents who have already mentioned that beginning at such a young age with sexual education should not be. I don't believe that they're able to respond to that or understand those things. And so I would urge really to push back the requirement for that in protection of those children. Last thing, one of the resources for the Advocates for Youth mentions from 0 to 3 years. Okay, I just had time to read through some of those things and many things were actually good to see that we're caring about the children. But one of them caught my attention that they are saying that from 0 to 3 years that the parents should encourage the children to appreciate their bodies. And I agree with that. I think that that's fine. But why would the same Advocates for Youth then support teaching that would encourage children to change what their bodies are, to change what they are being taught to appreciate in their own bodies? Why would they then urge them to support and say that we are supporting, right, these new terms that are being used for that? Why would they then advocate something that would result in the abuse and the changing of the body parts? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your comments.
Jenny Schmidt.
Good evening, Miss.
Good evening. Jenny Schmidt, 138 Fifth Street. Okay. I don't know why I'm like a little on edge today for some reason. I wanted to start by just commenting on what Dr. Haines said about when he started the presentation. Kids, we were this way in my generation. Fast forward, this happened. Fast forward, this is happening and we need to like, I guess, move with the times. I'm always, I think I've said this like 20 times, maybe not here, but definitely on social media. Like I'm always thinking 10 steps ahead. So I might be vocal now because I'm concerned, like really concerned about what sex ed looks like in 5 years. Like if we're here now, what are we doing in 5 years? What are we accepting of in 5 years? And listen, I am like, when it comes to inclusion and acceptance, that's a different topic. That's not sex ed. That's a whole different topic. That's SEL and everything else. So we're here just to talk about sex ed. So I'm only speaking about that. But, you know, you said fast forward, fast forward, fast forward. The only thing is kids are kids. Kids don't change. The brain in a 3-year-old didn't change. We change, society changes, internet changes, Snapchat apps appear. That doesn't mean a 3-year-old's any different today than they were 10 years ago. Their parents' outlook might be different, what they see might be different, but they're not different. And that just really like strikes me because I think we forget that. Like put yourself back where you were when you were 3. The same 3-year-old you were, Dr. Haines, is the same 3-year-old today. It's not any different. Same with 10, same with 12. They're just exposed to more. And in my opinion, parents got a lot lazier and they want to hand everything over to the teachers and the government to fix all their problems. We need to start being parents again. So my questions, these are pretty quick and easy. Obviously you answered this already. There's still no study from Taz, huh? Can't hear back from her. I think we should get our money back. We paid her for Q&A. We can't get an answer. I know why we can't get an answer, but that's neither here nor there. My other question very quickly, will gym teachers cover all the lessons, including, for example, like reading books for kindergartners, like on gender identity? Will the gym teacher be doing that? Or their regular teacher?
As in the last meeting, I'll go ahead and I'll take down your questions, but I'll answer all the questions at the end.
Okay. I think we should know the answer to that though. And if it's the gym teacher with any of these lessons, I'm particularly talking about elementary school, will the gym teacher teach this in a gymnasium with, you know, the entire gym class? How does that work? Masturbation and self-touch should not be in the curriculum and left up to the teachers. I understand kids ask questions. They're going to ask whatever they want to ask, and teachers are going to have to deal with that. But putting it right into the curriculum just gives teachers the okay to elaborate more than they need to, or, you know, way too much freedom on the teachers there on a very, like you said, controversial part of the standards. Take the word out of the curriculum. If a kid asks about it, then let the teacher handle it. Next, I've seen in certain parts of the curriculum that those, again, controversial standards, but maybe some of the others as well, but just an example, puberty and masturbation also shows up in like the drugs and alcohol subject. And I'm not understanding why that is. It makes it difficult for parents when it comes to opting out. You know, I might want to just graze through the drugs and alcohol category and not opt out. But then I see that masturbation and puberty is part of the drugs category. So that makes it difficult for parents to understand how they can opt out of something, or should they opt out of something. I also looked into a lesson that is posted on the curriculum. It's part of 5th grade puberty regarding the body parts. I have it right here. Dr. Haines answered the questions online and he said, I believe it was orgasm, and something else that are not mentioned in the state standard nor the curriculum guides that are posted. That's great. But if we're using this lesson, it's right here in the lesson. So again, I get it. Like you posted a million resources. It was very difficult for me to even spend the time to go through them, but I went through a few and boom, we have orgasm. It's right there. We have masturbation right there, 5th grade. Okay. We also have sculpted body parts. This is 5th grade. Again, it's all from the same lesson that Ridgefield Park shared. These are all different kinds of penises and vaginas in, you know, I guess sculpture form, but I don't know why we need it for 5th grade. I don't know. I don't know. I hope we're not using it. I hope you can tell me that. And I hope you can just take it out of the curriculum. Anyway, let's see. Okay. I have asked in more ways than one, whether it be via email or online, about this human sexual response cycle. I'm the girl who posted like 3 of those questions, all saying the same thing 10 different ways. And the reason I did that was because up until last night, there was no straight answer. As a matter of fact, there was false statements like it's not in the curriculum and it's not in the state standard. When again, I guess I have to make copies. There's the state standard. I can read it for you. It's for 9th through 12th grade. And it says, describe the human sexual response cycle, including the role of hormones and pleasure. Okay, that's 9 through 12. 8th grade Ridgefield Park curriculum states, identify factors that can affect the ability to give or perceive consent to sexual activities. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong one. Define vaginal, oral, and anal sex. Identify the phases of human sexual response. Now you've said orgasm's not mentioned in the curriculum or the state standards, but it says identify human sexual response. And I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm really just confused. How are they going to identify that without the word orgasm? And maybe you guys are just going to gloss over this standard because you don't like it and you know that I've pointed it out now. But tell me that. I mean, give me an answer about how you're going to teach that, because it's in 8th grade, despite the fact that it's for 9 through 12. Lastly, I just believe that parents need to step up. They need to do their job. They need to talk to their own kids about sex acts, gender identity, sex trafficking, safe and unsafe touches. I've heard all kinds of explanations and justifications from the board, from Dr. Haines, from Moms Online about why this is good for kids and why it needs to be taught by gym teachers. I don't agree with any of it.
Thank you for your
I'm just going to leave
comments.
it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay Sadler.
Hey, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I'm good. My name is Jay. Do I have to say my address?
Yes, please.
139 Overpeck Avenue, Ridgefield Park. Well, obviously, yeah. I'm 13 years old and I'm going to the 8th grade here this year. And I just wanted to address some of the statements that were made here earlier. So first of all, I don't know how I feel about the fact that there's going to be a separation of boys and girls in the sex ed lessons for 5th graders, because I think that girls should know what's going on with the guys and guys should know what's going on with the girls. Like I've had boys tell me that like they don't know how girls pee on their period, for example. I think that this is something that's important for everybody to know, regardless of their gender identity or of their sex. Everybody should know what's going on with the opposite sex, because it's just really important for people to know so they can understand. Another thing was that people are saying that these topics are inappropriate for children or that it's being taught too early. Quite honestly, I have classmates that aren't even virgins anymore. And I think it's not the fact that it's being taught too early. It's the fact that kids are just doing things earlier and earlier. And it needs to be taught before kids can get hurt so it can be prevented. So I don't think it's an issue teaching about these kinds of things while kids are young, because then that at least they will be aware of the dangers and of the consequences and of everything going on. So the next thing I was going to say was about transgender students. I myself am transgender. I use they, them pronouns. And I feel like being trans isn't something that people teach you. You just are. So even if you hear about trans things, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to grow up to be trans. For example, my twin brother, he's cisgender and I'm trans, and we grew up the exact same. And that doesn't mean he's going to be trans, but I am. And there's nothing wrong with that. And when I was little, I did not see any trans representation on the media, and I'm still transgender. Seeing media does not make me not transgender. So I really do not think that it's the case that if kids see things, it's going to make them trans. And even if it did, there is no issue with being trans. Being trans isn't something that needs to be cured, and it's not something that's an issue. Just let people be who they are. Thank you. The other thing was the bathrooms. So there's going to be a gender neutral bathroom added. That is not part of the curriculum, but I personally am really happy that it's going to be added. And I have a bunch of friends that are happy that it's going to be added, because it makes people feel more safe here. I feel like it's not an issue as long as it's going to make people safe. And I know some people are having an issue with like, oh, what if quote unquote boys and girls are going to be in the same room? It's single stall, so that won't even be an issue in the first place. And it's just going to make people feel more comfortable to be who they are. I know I felt uncomfortable every time I went into the girls' room. And so this is going to make it a lot easier actually for me to go to school. And so I won't have to worry about dealing with that. I used to just hold it until I got home. So things like that are going to make it easier for everybody. The next thing I was going to talk about was knowing why the names of private parts are helpful. So if, for example, a little boy says he was touching his train, nobody's going to know what that is. If he's trying to explain to the police, they're not going to understand. But if he says the actual terminology for it, people are going to understand, which is why knowing the actual names of body parts are helpful to people in situations where somebody may have been assaulted, because you need to know the proper terminology so you can get the proper help that you need. And there's nothing wrong with it. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with kids knowing the names of things. I think it's important, in fact, that they know the name for their own safety. And I know the Penn State situation where kids were like from the age of 8 to like high school and they knew the names. Well, people are still going to get assaulted regardless. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to like completely stop. Kind of like how if you get the COVID vaccine, doesn't mean you're never going to get COVID. It just means you're able to get more help if you do. And finally, the last thing I was going to talk about was that like people say that being trans or like teaching your children about trans issues is a form of abuse. It is not abuse. If anything, not teaching your kid about that can be a form of abuse. I had a horrible mental health the other year because I was not out as trans. I felt like I was trapped in the wrong body. I didn't feel like I could be myself. And knowing that I had my dad supporting me and my parents supported me, it honestly saved my life. I do not think I would be here today if me being trans wasn't accepted. So all I want to say is that there's nothing wrong with being who you are. Sex ed should be taught, and it's really important for everybody to know so that they can stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Sean Sadler.
Hey, good evening. How are you?
Hello, good evening, Mr. Fernandez, sorry, President Fernandez. Okay, so so I just wanted to first and foremost just thank everyone who put time and effort, into developing this curriculum. No, it's not an easy task to do all of the work that's required to develop it. So thank you to Dr. Haines, thank you to the board, thank you to the teachers who worked very hard, thank you to my fellow community members who come out and share their views, whether I agree or not. I think it's very important that we all have these discussions together as a community. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that I heard this evening. One of my neighbors asked, what's the benefit of this curriculum? And kind of suggested that in some way it's harmful to expose children. I heard the term gender issues, risky behavior. So I just wanted to reiterate something that I heard Taz say when she gave her presentation the other week rather. She mentioned that the curriculum is here, we're teaching facts, not values. And I think that that's a very, very important distinction for us all to take note of. The fact of human biology, of human anatomy, the fact of people who identify in different ways, whether it's with regard to sexual orientation or with regard to gender identity. The fact that these things exist is just something that children should be made aware of. That doesn't take away from a family's right, whether I agree or disagree, whatever my personal values may be, to teach what they want to teach their children about those facts when the children get home. So I do think that it's important that children have all of the information that they need in order to be informed, just members of society, in order to look out for their own wellness. Children share information with one another. So it's important that they are educated informed and they have this very basic knowledge. And parents still have the opportunity when they get home to teach whatever values they want their children to espouse to those children. There was another, my friend Jenny made a comment regarding the difference between inclusion and sex ed. And I just wanted to say respectfully, I do believe that there's a very clear connection between the two. My child just got up and very courageously shared that they themselves identify as trans. Very proud of you, Jake. So one of the things that I know that, you know, my own child struggled with, and some of my students, I'm a school counselor in the Bronx, and some of my students have struggled with as well, is just feeling that their own existence has been completely wiped out. And they're made to feel implicitly as though they don't matter. So just the fact of teaching the existence of people who may be different with regard to gender, or may be different from ourselves with regard to their sexual orientation, I think just the fact of having that representation goes a very, very, very long way. So when you can recognize someone else's humanity, you're able to include them. You're able to make them feel welcome. But if even the mere mention of their existence is deemed an issue or a problem, then clearly they're not going to feel included. So I did hear somebody just say behind me that they're not an issue. And to that individual who said that, I appreciate that. I agree with you. But there are people, because there was another neighbor of mine here today who did mention the term gender issues as though it's an issue to identify as trans or something other than cisgender. And then lastly, I just wanted to say with regard to parents stepping up, I definitely agree. You know, me, myself, I try to be the best father that I can. I'm sure that every parent does. We're all fallible. We all make mistakes. And I think that that's the importance of having, you know, a pluralistic, democratic society, right? It takes a village to raise a child. And that's what schools exist for, right? We come together as a community and we share ideas, right? We figure it out together. So, you know, my children will be exposed to the ideas, the ideals, the values of, you know, my wife and I and our family that helps us to raise our children, but also to the community at large, including all of my neighbors and friends here in Ridgefield Park, whose some of those ideas I may agree with, some of them I don't, but it's important for them to be exposed to them, to be able to process them, grapple them, and respect everyone as human beings, even if we don't fully agree with one another. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments.
Arlo Suero. Wanda.
They're both together. Olga Rios, 388 Main Street. I just wanted to say that the curriculum has a lot. There are a lot of resources. There are a lot of things that need to be read through. I'm sure a lot of you haven't been able to go through, you know, all the resources and all the little key points that maybe some of us have been able to do. So as Reverend, I forgot his name, as he mentioned, it would maybe be in the best interest to maybe hold off introducing the curriculum until maybe October, once everyone has had a chance to go through, you know, everything, because there might be some things there that once you read them, you know, they're not as common or as, you know, normal or whatever, you know. So just maybe holding off and being able to, I know that the Great Body Shop hasn't come in yet, so no one has actually gotten their hands on it yet, so it hasn't been reviewed. again, I have a lot more time than maybe some of you have. So I have been able to read the 3 R's curriculum and some of the resources a little bit more in depth. So, just holding off and just waiting a little longer once everyone has been able to really look into it and really read it might be in the best interest of, everyone. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Janet Malou.
Good evening.
Janet Malou, 163 Scranton Ave. Well, I took a lot of time today to, as usual, write stuff up, and a lot of it was answered, and some of it I will still refer to. I'm kind of go in a little different order than I originally had here. Okay, first of all, I appreciate that tonight is more of a, even though we're not really getting answers, it's a little more towards discussion. This is a controversial and a polarizing curriculum change. There's no doubt about that. And everybody's going to have different opinions. And a lot of what I've heard tonight, I can understand, I can agree with, and some maybe not just necessarily, I won't say disagree with, but it's a little out of my wheelhouse, maybe. As many of you know, I taught for many years. And over those years, yes, I did see it in a 32 plus career. I saw changes and I saw differences on how we dealt with kids. And I watched the kids that in a year or two later, when they got to the high school, because I was 7th and 8th, they became openly gay. They came out of the closet. I watched kids that transgendered. I watched kids that actually spent time, and I would never want this to happen again, in psychiatric facilities because their parents kept pushing back, and these kids were going over the deep end. And we finally got, in one of the last cases I dealt with, where we got the parents to finally come on board and accept what that child wished to do. And that's not easy, I'm sure. But and I have had a very dear friend whose husband, and I was their maid of honor, transgendered in his 40s. And I watched the impact that had on that family, and still does. So there's a lot to be looked at when we talk about topics like this. And I'm throwing that out there so that you realize I'm not living in a little quiet world next, not realizing that all this goes on. Jenny said something earlier about that kids don't change. It's society that's changing. I totally have to agree with that. I really do. And what I find interesting, and I'm thinking of, I have a student intern for the Arts Association, and she's now going, I guess, into her junior year. And the end of last year, when we brought her on board, and I spoke with Mom said to us, she can work on any activity you guys are doing. She can keep your website up to date, but she is not allowed on social media of any sort. So that means I can't have her go on my Facebook page and update anything. So there are still families that are holding the line, and that we have to recognize too. And I personally still cringe every time I see a 3-year-old throwing a tantrum because they can't get mommy's iPhone to watch a movie. Okay, there are lots of other ways to keep a kid occupied than that constant phone. And you look at, what they're watching, and there's where the progression starts. And there are a lot of phones, from what I understand, that do have blocks. Years ago, even though the phones were out in an earlier age, in our house, we chose not until my daughter was in 7th or 8th grade. And at that point, it wasn't even the real phone. It was one of those card phones. Okay, so it's what each family decides. But along the way, as I researched a lot of these actions, first of all, I will say when the curriculum guides went up, okay, and you look at it, looking at it as an educator, I know how to read it, and I am so thankful I don't have to read them anymore. They are convoluted to some extent. You really need a spreadsheet to follow them. And so for the average person looking at them, it's cumbersome. And I think a lot of parents are just going to skim it and say, okay, they'll see a few words that maybe they don't agree with, and then they're going to kind of push it aside, or they're going to opt out. I did look at other school districts, how they presented it. And one that really struck me is Mawa. And I really think everybody should take a look at the way they presented their lessons to their parents. It was much easier to understand. It said specifically what would be left to the discretion of the parent, what would go home, things of that nature. Where here it's still up in the air. And as somebody said, there were a lot of links on ours, one of them being an address to what's really a clinic in the UK. I really kind of wonder what was built into that was so necessary to add that on. I know my time is running here. Questions. If parents opt their children out, for instance, if you take one of the controversial, seemingly controversial topics, and you have 15 kids being opted out of a class of 25, where are they going? Who's watching them? What kind of situation do you have for that? And what if that's fivefold? I think you need to be prepared that if that were to happen, you need another place to put them. And it's not just a matter of, maybe putting them in guidance to go on some of those pages. The other question I have, where is it? When you were preparing this curriculum, did you look at any other districts besides Little Ferry and maybe Pagoda? Because we found districts, there's Tom's River, there's Sparta. I think Wayne, if I'm not mistaken, may have been in there, but also, as I said, Mawa, where they address the issues middle of the road, so to speak. And that's the other thing. I tend to be a more middle of the road person, just like I don't want something extremely controversial at one end. I don't want it at the other end either. I don't think it belongs in the classroom. And so those either extreme should really be left for parents to decide how they want to handle it at home. And that's a piece that I'm not, to some extent you're addressing it, but I don't think as much as it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Please promote.
Mrs. Raftery?
Good evening, Ingrid Raftery, 54 Euclid.
Good evening, miss. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I've been listening, and like I said in my previous meeting, I'm open to sex education, but I really hope that the board and Dr. Haines look at the MAWA, for instance. I looked at that and reconsiders how certain things are done in the classroom or in the gym room. I'm not sure exactly where the teaching will be. Also, I have to agree, I was impressed with Jenny Schmidt. And just for example, I met a parent, I'm not going to say names, on the bus. We had a short conversation, like for 15, 20 minutes. And I have to agree, parents are very lazy nowadays. And I don't mean that in any disrespect, but between not looking at anything that's going on, nor the conversation even came up, oh, my child doesn't read well. When I asked politely, well, do you sit at home in the evening or on your free time, whenever that is, and you guys read together or go to the library or whatever you have reading material? Oh no, that's up to the teacher. That's up to my first grade teacher to teach her reading. So I agree, parents are lazy. And the same thing with teaching at home. It starts at home. It starts from when they're born. It starts from their 2-year-old, when they're 3-year-old. That's up to parents then to explain body parts at that point when they do enter preschool. And they've been around. They might have been private, not free for everybody or by scale, but that's up to a parent, and a parent should be aware of those things. And all I can really say is I hope you look at the other districts, how they open up those conversations and what they want to teach. And there should be a middle ground, because it doesn't help, like the other lady said just prior, to opt out constantly. I don't really believe that's a good choice either. Like I said, the older students will get together and talk, and then there's going to be a lot of misinformation, because not all students are going to get what they're being taught during that time. So I really hope you reconsider and not rush into this. Quite frankly, Dr. Haines, these conversations, and I don't mean it as a criticism, but they should have been much earlier. They should have been started in March, April already, not in the summer when a parent's away. They don't look at the websites. They don't even know what's going on. I would have loved coming in person today, but unfortunately couldn't, so I'm Zooming in. But I'm hoping that more parents are getting involved, and you know, maybe we need to send out more letters. I don't know exactly how you can do that, that parents are more involved in general education besides the sex education. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Good evening. How are you?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Suheni Perez Sadler, 139 Overpeck Avenue. I'm just joining the conversation now, but I know that my husband and my child, Jay, were able to speak with you all a little earlier, and I'm sorry I missed that. And so I'm sorry if I am repeating some of the things that they may have said, but as a family, we have a lot of these conversations, and I think it's important for us to get to, one, I want to say thank you to all of the educators who worked on this curriculum. I think there was a lot of thoughtfulness that went in, and it shows the hard work. I think that these are difficult conversations, but I'm really excited that we're having them and that the state is really providing us with an opportunity to talk about it. At the heart of it is, what is the role of public education, right? And for me, it's always about preparing our children to be citizens of this society, to have the skills, to really have, you know, the best of careers, and to really be good citizens, which in my opinion means good human beings, that they treat each other with kindness and they see the humanity in their fellow citizen. At one point, women weren't given full citizenship, and we had to fight for that. At another point, Black people were given full citizenship, and we had to fight for that. And now we're at the forefront of gay rights and the fact that the LGBTQ community is not seen as full citizens, and we have to fight for that. And we see, and I think that some of the community members talked about this, but LGBTQ have the highest suicide rates in the entire country. There are most vulnerable children. And so anything that happens inside of the classroom, that can really mold and support and instruct our students to be good citizens and to be good humans that can really lead to a kinder, more gentler, and more inclusive world, I think is a step in a positive direction. I know that some parents feel like they can opt out of different things, and we have a right as a parent, but I would hope that we come together as a community and not opt out of these important conversations, because it truly is, for me, about, like I said from the beginning, the role of public education, and that is to prepare our young people, our children, to be future leaders and to take their place in society. And that includes being a good citizen and a decent human being. So I applaud everyone who's been working on this. I don't think it's perfect. Nothing is. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board where we feel that there are imperfections and make sure that we can get it as close to perfect as possible. But this is definitely a step in the right direction, and I am really heartened by this conversation. So thank you, everyone, and I hope that we all get to enjoy the rest of our evenings.
Thank you for your comments. Good evening.
Ina?
Good evening. Can you hear me well?
Yes, ma'am. You.
Yes. Hi, good evening. My name is Elena Hanna. I live in Little Ferry, 14 St. John Street. I have 3 children. They attend the Little Ferry Public School, and I teach my kids to respect all, regardless of race, gender, or bank account. We are all equally important as humans, and this is what I teach my kids. With that being said, I really hope that Board of Education can look at how other districts implemented the same exact standards, but yet decided to preserve the innocence of children, respect parents' role in their children's education, and simply put, use common sense. For example, Thames River, Sparta, and Mawa, they are implementing New Jersey standards, but they are not exposing children in kindergarten and first grade to any of new standards at all. Second graders will be learning all new topics at home under their parents' supervision, and they still can opt out. All new standards are presented to children at the highest grade. So if standards are required to be taught by the end of second grade, only second graders will be exposed to it, and it is still done at home. If the standards are for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, only the 8th graders get to learn about it. Why our districts cannot do the same? You can do the same or even better. You will still meet the standards. All you need to do is simply follow those standards and implement an age-appropriate curriculum. What's being presented today is not age-appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If you could please promote anybody new. Good evening. Ms. Kelly, I think this is a repeat. If you could please promote anybody new hands up, please. Good evening.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Good evening.
Okay, Susan DeSantis, 15 Homestead Place. I have a few issues. First of all, you're going to have teachers in the same grade, not necessarily teaching the same thing. And I think that whatever you're teaching, it should be consistent across the grade levels. The other thing is, I agree with Mrs. Rafferty that this really should have been brought up earlier in the year when parents were away on vacation and people were in school. And the third thing is, this has been promoted as a discussion, a town hall, and there is really no dialogue. There's people saying things, no responses. Questions answered through this convoluted, you have to fill out a form and put it online, then I'll answer it. And a lot of people have said that they asked questions that were never answered. And I just think that this was just presented all wrong. I think it could have been presented better. I don't really seem to have an issue with sex ed. I never had. I'm a little concerned about the 3 through 5 and anal discussion. I think that's too early, maybe grade 6 to 8 or something. But I really think that this really could have been presented better. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello.
Yes, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing well. Thank you. Maria Escobar, 80 Orchard Street. So my first question is this. Is the Board of Ed as a whole getting funds from the federal government for using advocacy for youth as their guide for a curriculum? Hello?
We'll answer all questions at the end.
Okay, great. Thank you. I did see in some work that Advocacy for Youth does have some great regards to bullying and protecting our children and so on. But what concerns me is that along with that, they're also promoting lessening police in our schools in order to use those funds to promote, to help the children learn how to be activists. Are you aware of that? All right, that's right. You'll answer all questions at the end. Okay, so that's a bit of a concern for me because it's kind of like on the back end of this program. My other question is, and I hope these all get answers because I get a lot of, it was an answer, it was an answer. My other question is, have you met with all the principals in the schools, with the health educators, with the guidance, with the biology and science teachers? And have you met with all of them prior to expediting the curriculum? That's my other question. Have you met with psychologists and experts, or you're just going by what Advocacy for Youth has said about this? That is my other question. Now, my comment is the following. I understand that we have to move with the times, as everyone has said. And I understand that the children are being exposed to more. But I think it would be a great idea is, as you are having these retreats, could you also have retreats independently in the schools with the parents, along with the health educators that you're going to be, that are going to be teaching this to our children, so they also get an idea and we're all on the same page. And they can hear more voices in regards to what is happening. I am not anti-trans. I am not in any way minimizing the importance, how important it is to expose our children to everything that is quote unquote the norm that is happening now. Because I think that the difference here is that normalizing is being confused with acceptance. I commend everyone that has taken the time to review the curriculum. I appreciate everyone who's has stood up and has spoken. I hope that our voices are heard. I think that maybe something that we should absolutely include is to really teach children to appreciate and love themselves first. What is important is that they embrace themselves. I understand that as a community, we should come together and embrace everyone. But as individuals and independents, our children go to their rooms, they're on their own. We each go to our own spaces to isolate, to deal with things. I think that we should teach our children to embrace themselves, whether you're a boy, whether you're a girl, whether you're trans, LGBTQAA, everyone. Embrace themselves first. If they can learn to embrace themselves and appreciate themselves first and how and the people that they were born to be, I think that they would see that they are able to go out there and embrace everyone as well. It's not just about isolating everyone and labeling people. I think that we're over labeling people. That's my issue here. Just appreciate everyone around you. Embrace everyone around you. Everyone gets a good morning. Everyone gets a goodbye. Everyone gets a hello. We acknowledge people not by their gender, not by their religion, not by the color of their hair. But when we embrace everyone, we become a closer community. That's just my opinion on that. So if I can get those questions answered that I had from the beginning, I'd really appreciate it. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, that'll conclude our public comment section of this retreat. Any comments, questions by any board members?
Yeah, if I could just have a couple comments. And some of this might be my beliefs and some of this might be facts. As Mr. Sadler said, I thought that was a very good point, facts, not values. But my opinion is children are born who they are. They are not encouraged. It's not a debate club. They're not encouraged to come and do something that if they hold the hand of their partner, somebody might come up to them and spit in their face, or worse, maybe beat them up, maybe even worse than that. My philosophy when I got on the board was always if we can help one child, then we're ahead of the game. So I know there was some numbers why we are trying to include. There's no benefits in that. Inclusion is education. Inclusion is in the education, because parents, maybe parents are lazy, right? They're not teaching and they're not including their kid in today's full spectrum. But I know that we were talking, I think it was the last one, there was a lot of numbers coming out and there was only a certain amount % of children that were in California or here or there. So here's I just wanted to touch on something that Mrs. Sadler said. This is national data that many LGBTQ young people continue to suffer higher health and suicide risks than their peers. This follows the same trends present in an analysis in 2015-2017 data. LGBTQ plus students are more likely to experience victimization, violence, suicide. In many areas of the data, transgender students are facing more disparities in 2019 than was 2017. It's getting worse. The data shows 43% of transgender youth have been bullied on school property. Again, inclusion is in education. 29% of transgender youth, 21% of gay and lesbian youth, and 22% of bisexual youth have attempted suicide. 3 in 10
I'll say it again, inclusion is in education. So parents of children who are LGBTQ plus are not lazy. You know, my kids were, two of them, top 5, not top 5%, top 5 of their graduated. So that's number 5. Number 3, I tend to think I wasn't lazy, or my wife wasn't lazy. And maybe took it in the wrong way. But I can tell you this, when children understand maybe not who they are, but who their peer is, they will be less to bully, less to single them out. You know, it's a terrible saying that somebody said before, coming out of the closet. That saying was because children were hiding, disgustingly hiding, afraid to just tell who they are. And yet, remember, facts, not values. Facts, not religion. Facts. Inclusion is in education.
I have a couple of comments as well. And they're not in any order because I've just been taking notes, but I do know that knowledge is power. And I know that when I was a kid, we didn't know about a lot about populations that were different than us, and people got bullied and people got hurt. And one of my biggest regrets in life is not standing up for somebody who's bullied for being gay. So I get a little choked up too. I think knowledge is power. And you know, with when we were being taught about drugs and about alcohol, and they started the whole campaign with drugs and alcohol, you know, one of the fears, and I remember my parents saying, like, why did they teach you how a joint is rolled? And why did they teach you about all these different types of alcohol? And we know that when kids are educated about drugs and alcohol, they're less likely to use drugs and alcohol. And I think the same is true with these other issues, other concerns and other topics, is that when kids know more about actually sex and more about their body parts, the evidence shows, and I'm going to disagree with one of the comments that was made, that kids are being more sexual. Kids are more sexualized, but actually sexual behavior is on the decrease among teenagers. Teenagers are pushing out when they start having sex more and more. They're pushing out more and more when they get pregnant. Teen pregnancy is down. All of these different variables, and much of it is because they know. And so either kids learn this from school, they learn it from their parents, or they're going to learn it from a 16-year-old boy. And so I think that many of these topics that we're afraid, and you know, I have kids in the district too, and I'm sometimes afraid of the things they're going to be exposed to, and whether it's too early. But my overwhelming principle is that knowledge is power. I think that with regard to some of the things that our kids are going to be exposed to, unless you are one of those very disciplined, and God bless you, I know I messed up by giving my kids a cell phone too early. Unless you're one of those parents that's so disciplined that your kids are not on any type of media, social media, TV, anything, and they don't have friends who do. Because I know when I would take my kids' phone away because they were punished, and then I would check their accounts, they were using their friends' phones to get on their social media accounts. And so unless you're able to really be that disciplined with your kids are being exposed to horrific things. And if you ask them for an honest conversation, they will tell you that they have been to and seen the darkest corners of the internet. And there's almost no way to keep that out of their hands, especially once they get a cell phone. So I think that teaching kids that some people drive, in other words, awareness, is different than teaching kids that they should drive. I think that I hope the proposal is not to teach kids how to do these things, how to be gay, how to be transgender, how to be sexually active. That what we're teaching them is that these things exist, and that they should be aware of them. The other thing I'll say is, you know, I'm a little bit of an expert in this area, and I don't say that often. And if my wife was here, she'd probably disagree with me being an expert at anything. But I've worked with hundreds of people, maybe close to 1,000 people that have been sexually assaulted. And I've worked with about 500 people who committed sexual assaults. And I will say that while I don't know, I've been looking, Jenny, I've been looking for that study that was mentioned. I haven't found that study that says that it protects kids from being sexually assaulted. But I will tell you that having gotten into the mind of several hundred sex offenders, they target kids that don't know. And the less a kid knows, the more that kid becomes a target. There are families where the offender did not abuse 3 of the kids and just offended 1 of the kids or the youngest kid. And so knowledge is power. The first thing we do when we have a kid who's been sexually abused is we tell them we do comprehensive sexual education. When we have kids who've been exposed to pornography too early, we do comprehensive sexual education because it allows the kid to know these are my private parts. This is what is supposed to feel good. This is what's not supposed to be done to me. And so it does protect kids. And I know it's anecdotal. I couldn't find that study. I did look, but anecdotally, but that's fine. But yeah, but I don't work for her. So I'm speaking my experience with the many people who've been hurt is that they don't know. And so these are a couple of things that I wanted to speak on. And so the other thing I want to say is that as I see the curriculum, I hope that we're not going to teach this on September 7th or the first day of school. All these topics will be dumped out. I think it's a parent's responsibility. We've been talking about that. I don't think parents are lazy, actually. I think parents are really busy, and it takes 2 parents to raise a household now. So I don't, especially not in this town. If you go to any one of our events, you couldn't fit any more parents into the gym or into the cafeteria. So I don't think our parents are lazy. They're busy, and our kids have extra privacy that we didn't have as kids. But I think that parents have a responsibility. If some of these things that are being taught don't agree with your core values, you have a responsibility to pull your kid aside and say, what did you learn in school today? What did they tell you? And then tell them, well, this is what's going to happen in this house. The same as I do when my kids tell me, my 19-year-olds tell me that, we're in college and people drink. Like, yeah, I know people drink. I know you may have a drink, but that's not okay with me. You're not of age. And so parents have a responsibility to say, I know they taught you about sex, but you're not doing that. And if I catch you doing it, X, Y, Z is going to happen. This curriculum does not rob, or any curriculum does not rob us as parents from doing the right thing by our kids in either direction. There's been plenty of history lessons that have been taught in this building that I have untaught as soon as they got home with their artwork or something. And I've untaught them because that's not the value that we have in my house. So I want to encourage parents to come to these meetings. I want to encourage parents to speak to the teachers. I asked Dr. Haines, are we asking too much of the teachers to send this curriculum out and keep the parents informed? He said, it shouldn't be. And I think you should hold teachers accountable to that. If your teacher's teaching your kids something that you don't agree with or you have questions about, my experience with most teachers in this district, the vast majority of teachers, I'm not going to say I do it, but my wife does it. She's better at it. But when she emails the teachers, they get right back to her and they answer the questions. And it should be a discussion. And the other thing I'll say is that this curriculum is coming out now, these changes, but they're not going to be the same in 5 years. You're absolutely right, Jenny. They're not going to be the same in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. The iPhone's been around for about 10 years. There's no way for us to guess what it's going to be like in 5 or 10 years. This should be a living, breathing document that I hope is altered as we go along. When teachers come back and say, this ditto that I handed out, sorry to use the word ditto, was trash and it went horrible, we shouldn't use it, and that teachers are going to talk to each other, and this will be refined further. So I want to encourage parents to stay engaged.
I just want to make a couple of very quick comments. When I read through the changes in the curriculum, what's new, what's changed, the slight changes that I see in what the standard are really what Mr. Sadler and Dr. Martinez just said. It's informing on facts. There are, lines in there about the gender identity. And I think that's because it is different and new to be accepted. And that's why it is specifically called out, but doesn't diminish the fact that there's instruction about straight sex, because the vast majority of the population is, and they need to understand it. They need the facts, whether you are straight or LGBTQ. Individuals need information to make decisions on their own, and with the help of their family, their friends, whoever else is out there that speaks to values. The other thing that I wanted to say was we employ a large number of teachers that are professionals that we entrust with the education of our children every day. And when the state comes down with standards and we have to teach to those standards, we need to give those teachers the level of trust that they understand and are interpreting them, and they're being sensitive to the way that they're delivered so that they are accepting of the entire population that's in the school and allowing the entire population to respect each other. So it's definitely a sensitive topic, a difficult topic because of the values that come into play, but it is knowledge and information, and it's important for everyone to have that and make their own value decisions once they have it. So thank you to everyone who commented, because I think that the comments were all very respectful and collaborative. I thank the people that put the curriculum together, and in advance, those teachers that have to teach it and that will be working with the students and the parents to make sure that we are educating our children appropriately.
Bernard, did you have something to say, sir?
No, I just want to say thank you to everyone who worked on this curriculum. Thank you, President Fernandez, for asking if I did have a comment or, as an educator, I understand what they went through writing curriculum. I just wrote curriculum this summer. Was not an easy task. And for them to take on having to send home and kind of a lead of what they're going to teach, it really is a daunting and very challenging task for educators. And I hope that the public really appreciates what the teachers are going to be going through in doing that and sending home and kind of give them a lead of what they're doing in the classroom. I did like all the comments I heard, both sides. I think this is a touchy topic, and I'm sure if we were changing curriculum for many of our other subjects, it wouldn't be such a important thing, but because it crosses into all these different social lines, people have very strong opinions about it. So I'm glad that we're able to, have a social and very, productive discussion about it. Thank you.
Mrs. Orth, did you have anything? Any comments, miss?
No, I think everyone has really, I would reiterate what all of my fellow board members just stated. And I think that it's important to remember that, these are the same teachers that will be teaching this, that have been teaching that we have been trusting to teach our children for many years now. And we need to not lose sight of the fact that there are no agendas here. These are teachers who are professionals who are charged with the task of teaching our children, and we need to trust them to do so.
Trustee Gibbons, Trustee Freitas, did you have any comments on this one? You're muted, sir.
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out, and I know this is, these are touchy subjects, but everyone had good points that came to the podium and spoke, and thank you for the board members that spoke as well. And yes, we do have to entrust in our teachers and our administrators to do the right thing, and we have entrusted in our teachers before. And if parents do have some concern in parts of a curriculum, they always have the option to opt out. But thank you very much.
I just wanted to echo the same things that Trustee Gibbons said and what everybody else said. It is a very touchy subject. I mean, it's being discussed not only here in Ridgefield Park, but in Little Ferry and throughout the state. And everybody's just trying to I appreciate everybody getting together and trying to see what we could put out, what's best for the children and best for our community. So thank you.
Yes, as a board president, I'd like to thank everybody who put this curriculum together. I know it wasn't a daunting task to the supervisors, administrators, acting superintendent, putting this retreat together. And not to lose sight of what tonight was about, I want to thank everybody for your open dialogue, the tone that was in the room. I thought it was very well said, spoken, received by the board, received by our peers. Thank you, everybody, for being respectful of everybody's opinions, thoughts, and acceptance of what these changes are. It's not easy, but we will get through this together. Thank you.
So on to some of the questions and answers that came up earlier. To the pastor, and thank you for joining our meeting, by the way. I love when community members show up. I think I speak on behalf of the board that we love when community members show up outside of our education. One of the things you said was that the links weren't easy to find, and that is because the links went out to all of the families in the community through what's called the school messenger. So automatically every family who had children in our district got links, which were probably harder to find on the website. You probably eventually got there because a family passed along the message that they got that had all the embedded links. That's a point well taken. The gender neutral bathroom, as Jay remarked, is in progress, and this building should open up at the beginning of the year with a gender neutral bathroom. Questions from Ms. Schmidt. Will gym teachers teach lessons from books and genitals? So as we just heard over the last 5 minutes, and I need to echo, we have great professionals in this district, and some of them worked a lot on these lessons, and some have not had an opportunity to work or review the lessons, as some of you haven't. So at the beginning of the year, and I give thanks again to the Board of Education who had the foresight to pass a calendar this year that allows 5 professional development days. And during those days, we expect our health teachers to get together with the nurses and the counselors and other collaboration in the schools to look over these and best decide how they're delivered, who delivers them. And I think that's, again, something that was just echoed. That's what our professionals do. They collaborate, they decide, and they deliver what I think are professional lessons in a professional way. Mrs. Schmidt, you held up a picture or a graphic, and the fact that you held it up would be the same kind of conversations that I've had over the past couple of weeks with principals and health educators. If somebody's holding up a graphic and they're even questioning it, they're probably not using it. If they're holding up a graphic and it's a resource in this curriculum and they're thinking about using it, it goes through a discussion, and they might consider, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, they put it out to the parents in advance and say, this is a graphic that will come up within 4 or 5 weeks, and we will be teaching about it. If you would like to opt your child out, you may. I kind of, in the graphic that you held up, I think that's more of a, we probably won't be using this. The separate by puberty, and Jay mentioned this, that why are we talking about boys and girls in separation? Because we have a board policy that talks about transgender and other kinds of gender identity. And that's something that we can grow into. I would say that in this first year, as we implement these standards and we teach boys about deodorant and other things, and that's what happens in those puberty lessons, I think there is a level, but I also think there's an opportunity for discussion, how we might change those lessons in the future. So I passed this up. This is the board policy 5756, and I don't want it to go unnoticed, because a policy that is passed by the board means that we're beholden to these standards. And I'm going to read through some of them because a lot of these definitions came up tonight. A lot of the discussion was on these. And the definitions that come up in the board policy include gender identity, gender expression, assigned sex at birth, sexual orientation, transgender, transition, LGBTQ, gender expansive, cisgender. I, as the superintendent, because this is board policy, and charged to ensure that this is taught in our district and that we respect these and we teach these within the curriculum. The board likewise upholds board policy in our district. So that's why there is no suggested opt-out for anything that appears in a board policy. I just wanted to give that again. That's also linked for the people who are not in person. That's linked at home for you to look at board policy 5756. The question about resources in the curriculum, yes, there are numerous ones. And as I said a minute ago, I expect the health teachers to have a conversation in groups with other peers across the district. This curriculum in K-8 was done in collaboration with Little Ferry. Mr. Scarafil and I have talked about those professional development days, which we plan to coincide on the same calendar, so our teachers could talk across the district. We're both fervent believers that the more brains you have in the room to talk about the resources and how you're teaching a lesson, probably the better the outcome. So we look forward to that collaboration too. A board member mentioned earlier a family health night, which I'm a huge proponent of. Mr. Ramundi, I'm going to put you in charge of this, that as we roll this out sometime, I'm thinking October, November, we should have a family health night, because somebody also mentioned it's hard to go through this curriculum and understand all of it. I'd love to see a family health night. We could hire a consultant in to at that point, look at some of the controversial topics, but also go through some of the topics within the curriculum and some of the resources we're using that time once teachers have come back to school and gotten acclimated along with students. Question of if we have more students, like 15 students opting out of a controversial topic. It's something that came up in our teaching and learning committee about a week and a half ago, where we had principals present and they were brainstorming ideas. Yes, what are we going to do when a large group of students opts out? Where are we going to put them? And I'm thrilled that we have professionals to troubleshoot that and problem solve those kinds of things. And they've already started talking about it moving forward. The advocacy for youth question, I honestly don't know. I know we don't receive money from the group advocacy for youth. Because we don't receive money, I don't see any activists being produced by any of their materials. I can check back into once we start teaching them. I don't even think we'll use many of those materials, but that's best around October, November, me checking with the teachers and seeing what resources they're using. But we don't accept money. We don't sponsor the organization. And in conclusion, to echo what everybody else on the board has said, my fellow board members, thank to all the professionals in the district, the teachers, the health teachers, Nicole Pucciarelli, who was instrumental, who worked and collaborated with Little Ferry on the curriculum, Mr. Ramundi on the support of the curriculum and his staff, the ongoing curriculum meetings that we look forward to having with groups of educators, nurses, health teachers, and counselors. And again, thrilled of the exchange of ideas. I felt like this was a safe place where people could come to the podium and respectfully address each other, even if we don't agree. That to me is what we do as a learning community to create an educated citizenry. I think everybody should applaud each other for that. Our goal across all curriculum is to support students in self-advocacy, and as was the history of a free public education in the United States, to create an educated citizenry. I thank everybody for the free exchange of ideas and opinions tonight as we move forward into the new year. Thank you again.
I just have a comment. First of all, I just want to thank you for clarifying. That was one of the questions that I had well, first of all, how many health teachers participated in creating the curriculum, but you clarified that they will have PD and they'll have time to unpack the standards and discuss and see how to approach it. I've been very quiet today. I understand being a mother of 5 and having a child in the elementary. I understand the concerns, and there will be difficult conversations. And we've had many conversations about the inability of having difficult conversation in terms of race in this district. So we are going to have difficult conversation. We need to be prepared as a district because we're not going to make everybody happy. When Mr. and Mrs. Sadler's child made a comment about separating the boys and the girls. So right there, we're separating the boys and the girls during a lesson. How about those gender neutral, non-binary child? What are we going to do? We need to be prepared. So I'm glad that we're not rushing into it and we're not teaching it the first day of school, but we really need to look at other districts and see their curriculum.
Well, thank you, everyone. Yep. Motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.